Welcome to this explainer. So, have you ever looked at your life and thought, everything seems perfectly fine on paper? I mean, you've got a job, friends, a roof over your head, but somehow something inside you just always feels a little bit broken. Well, today we're going to explore exactly why 7 common behaviors that you probably consider to be deep personal flaws are actually profound psychological survival responses.
Let's kick things off with a pretty hard question, and I really want you to think about this before answering. When was the last time someone asked you, "Are you okay?" and you actually told the complete truth? Not, "I'm fine," not, "I'm good," not, "Oh, don't worry about me." The real, unfiltered truth. If you're like most people, you probably can't even remember. And honestly, what's truly scary about this isn't that you're just too strong or that you don't need help. It's that a little voice deep inside you is convinced that no one actually wants to hear the real answer.
Okay, let's dive right into this and completely reframe how you're looking at yourself here. These seemingly normal habits, like overthinking every single text message or over-apologizing for literally just taking up space, they are not broken parts of your personality. No way. Psychology actually recognizes these as silent wounds from your childhood. And look, this isn't about blaming anyone. It's about finally understanding yourself. All right, we're going to group these 7 habits by their psychological roots to help make sense of the whole picture. So starting off with symptom group 1, submission and invisibility, which covers habits 1 and 2.
Habit number 1 is apologizing for absolutely everything. Now, in psychology, this is officially called the fawn response. You've definitely heard of fight or flight, right? Well, fawn is kind of the lesser-known sibling. When a kid grows up in an environment where their feelings are just totally ignored, they very quickly learn to appease everyone around them just to keep the peace and avoid conflict. Just think about your everyday apology triggers for a second. You bump into a chair, literally, an inanimate object, and you immediately say, "Sorry." Someone raises their voice, instinctive apology. You simply have a different opinion than someone else, and you preface it with an apology. You're doing this because your childhood brain learned that surviving meant never, ever drawing negative attention to yourself.
Because the internal dialogue running in the background of that trauma response sounds exactly like this. If I stay small and say sorry, I'm going to be safe. That little child eventually grew up, sure, but that survival habit, it stayed firmly in place.
And this perfectly leads into habit number 2, which is the complete inability to accept compliments. When someone praises you, you immediately deflect. But why? Well, the root of this adult habit is that your childhood achievements were never truly celebrated, because no one looked at you back then and said, "Wow, I am so proud of you." Your adult brain simply doesn't have the internal wiring to believe praise when you hear it today.
Moving right along to our next group of symptoms, symptom group 2, anxiety and overfunctioning. Let's see how this builds into chronic anxiety with habits 3 and 4.
So, habit number 3 is overthinking every single little thing. A friend doesn't reply for 2 hours, and your brain instantly decides, "Yep, they're furious with me." Your boss looks slightly serious in a meeting, and you immediately assume you're getting fired. This is rooted in what psychologists call hypervigilance. It's this incredibly elevated, exhausting state of constantly watching for potential threats. You see, kids who grew up in unpredictable homes were basically always watching. Growing up there meant constantly scanning the room for danger and preparing for the absolute worst-case scenario. And honestly, that was a highly effective survival skill for a kid. But unfortunately, it followed you right into adulthood, making everyday interactions utterly exhausting. And that hypervigilance creates habit number 4. You always put others first. A friend needs help? Boom, you cancel your plans. But when you need help, absolute crickets. You stay silent. You handle your own struggles entirely alone because, deep down, you internalize this incredibly painful belief, my needs just don't matter. They weren't a priority back then, so you literally learn to erase them.
Now we've reached our final set, symptom group 3, the void and the guilt. These habits are all about the absolute inability to rest, to ask for support, or really to even feel joy.
Habit number 5 is feeling this intense, crushing guilt for doing absolutely nothing. Picture a lazy Sunday. Instead of just relaxing and recharging, your brain is screaming at you that you're being lazy. Why does this happen? Because as a neglected child, love wasn't freely given to you. It had to be constantly earned through good grades, perfect behavior, or just being useful. Rest was never, ever allowed. And actually, that transactional nature of love feeds right into habit number 6, struggling to ask for help. It usually happens in this really simple, heartbreaking sequence. Step 1, you ask for help as a kid. Step 2, nobody comes, or worse, you're called weak for even bothering them. So step 3, you just stop asking forever. You end up carrying the weight of the entire world totally alone.
Which finally brings us to habit number 7, feeling totally empty even when life is actually going great. You achieve this massive goal, but instead of happiness, you feel absolutely nothing, or worse, you feel guilty for not feeling happy enough. Psychologists call this emotional numbness. It's a hardcore defense mechanism where your brain effectively powers down your emotional center.
Because when a child's emotions are constantly dismissed or ignored, the brain steps in to protect them. It basically learns a really harsh lesson. Hey, don't feel too much. It's just not safe to feel. So it shuts those feelings down completely. But the tragic side effect here is that by numbing out the pain, you also numb out the joy, making happiness incredibly difficult to experience as an adult.
Okay, bringing it all together now. Let's transition from looking at these isolated symptoms and reframe your past as one complete picture.
Think back to that little voice we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer, the one telling you nobody wants to hear your problems. That voice came from an environment where neglect was your reality. Your feelings were unheard. Asking for help was practically dangerous. Love had to be earned. Because this was your everyday normal, you didn't even know anything was wrong in the first place. So we need to radically reframe how you see yourself here. You are not fundamentally broken. You're not weak, and you are absolutely not too sensitive. Actually, scratch that. You are simply someone who survived something incredibly difficult without even knowing it was difficult at the time. You developed this brilliant psychological armor to protect yourself. I want to leave you with this final thought for today's explainer. Knowledge is literally where healing begins. Now that you can clearly see these invisible strings tying back to your past, take a moment to honestly reflect. Which of these 7 habits do you recognize most in yourself today? The kid inside you and the incredible adult you are today deserve so much better. So how are you going to begin to